Hello, I'm the Nostalgia Critic. I remembered so you don't have to. Let's talk about whitewashing. Stop! Obviously, this is a subject everybody has a strong opinion on, especially given the news recently. Two big movies have just done previews, a trailer from Marvel's Doctor Strange and a still from Paramount's remake of Ghost in the Shell. The internet flipped, as both films were accused of whitewashing, which, for those who don't know, is when a person who's supposed to be of a certain ethnicity is suddenly played by a white person. In Ghost in the Shell's case, people were upset because Scarlett Johansson was playing what was originally an Asian character, and in Doctor Strange's case, a Tibetan man is now being portrayed as a Celtic woman, played by Tilda Swinton. This is a touchy subject that's making a lot of people feel enraged. Whitewashing is an art that, let's face it, white people have mastered bullshitting for years. Which is all the more reason to get upset. People can't believe that it's still going on. Is America, home to so many different cultures and races, still resorting to the same offensive tricks? Have things really gotten better, or have we just disguised our hypocrisy even more? Well, for Ghost in the Shell, originally a Japanese property, there is one group of people that, for the most part, doesn't seem to have that big a problem. The Japanese! Granted, we obviously can't speak for all of them, but when asking random Japanese people on the street what they thought of the casting of the film, most of them seemed pretty okay. Not only did they say she looked like the character, but they also knew it was an American film, and American films have mostly white actors. I guess in hindsight, if Japan did their version of, say, Superman, and they cast a Japanese actor in the role, Americans probably wouldn't care. I think most people are assuming too that because the film is made by Americans, it probably wouldn't take place in Japan. The same way The Ring or The Grudge were Asian properties, but clearly weren't filmed in Asia and didn't star Asian people. Or the same way they remade Seven Samurai in the Old West, the first time. In fact, there's tons of remakes of foreign films that have done this, as well as replaced the actors with white Americans, but have never gotten criticized. Even to this day. So, why is this one getting so beaten up? Well, there could be a couple reasons. One could be the character struck such a chord with anime fans that the identity was so tied to her Japanese heritage. Or, most likely too, America has so many Asian American actors, some of which are even featured in the film, that it seems pointlessly silly not to cast one in the leading role. They are still, after all, Americans. I also keep hearing that there's no Asian American actors big enough to guarantee a good box office. Well, first of all, there's tons of Asian American actors, and many of them are very successful. But I know what they mean when they say none of them are as big as Scarlett Johansson. Sure, star power is important, but guess what? Some of the highest grossing movies and franchises don't have huge names as the main characters. Who heard of Daniel Radcliffe before Harry Potter? Who heard of Christopher Reeve before Superman? Most of the names in Avatar aren't that huge. Harrison who? Star what? Bomb! But what about Doctor Strange's case? Is there really a bias against Tibetan actors? Well, yes, but not in the way that you think. You see, 18% of Marvel's motion picture income stems from China. And guess who China is not exactly the biggest fan of? Correct. So the choice was made to change the character so much, from a male Tibetan to a Celtic female, that hopefully it would be so different that nobody would notice. You have totally underestimated your geeky fan base. We get upset when a good-looking white man plays a good-looking white man. On the one hand, it's good to know that the American filmmakers don't have any real anti-Tibetan agenda. I mean, they're a business and they want to make as much money as they can, but on the other hand, it's still ethically wrong. They're putting a prejudice ahead of not making more money. But let's be honest, this happens a lot in business. Like, all the time. And let's also be honest, we've let very similar choices slide recently. Oh, what? You mean blackface or that slanty eye makeup that never fooled anyone? Come on, that's not us, that's the generation before us. That stuff is, but you've been okay with a lot more than you think. In fact, we've grown up with it mostly in cartoons. Apu and Dr. Hibbert? White guy. Aladdin and Jasmine? White people. Hey, you remember all those animes starring Japanese people? Practically all of them are redubbed by white Americans. In fact, there was even a Cowboy Bebop movie in the works for a while that was going to star Keanu Reeves, and people were actually excited about it. Well, wait a minute, how come this gets a pass but Scarlett Johansson doesn't? But it doesn't stop there. Belle's not French, Tina's not a girl, Tommy's not a boy, Neil Patrick Harris isn't straight, Robin Williams isn't gay, and speaking of comedies, I don't think the cast of Life of Brian are actually Israeli. In fact, Britain and a lot of other countries have posed as us a lot. Some of our most famous American roles are played by actors who are not American. And it even works the other way around. Performers like Alfred Molina or Rama Mafia, they've played almost every ethnicity there is because they look like almost every ethnicity there is. In fact, something that's getting a lot of praise is when a role that's meant for a white actor is suddenly being played by a person of color. And I know what you might be saying. How is a person of color playing a white person's role any different from a white person playing a person of color's role? Stop! I'm not going where you think I'm going. The answer is obvious, because of the whitewashing we've had in the past. America clearly hasn't had the best record in terms of treating people equally, and it's obvious there has been years of keeping women, foreigners, and anybody of color as somehow lower than white men in both society and our media. Because of this, we're more open to allowing the gender or race of what was a white male change to reflect the growing environment. But even taking race out of it, there's tons of similar whitewashing going on that we've just allowed. I was actually shocked when they did Lord of the Rings and they didn't hire little people for the job. Now, don't get me wrong, the actors were all great, I had no problem with their performances, but the only time little people were used is when you saw the back of their heads. Why are we okay with that? They can play supporting munchkins or elves, but starring roles was asking too much? There's plenty of actors who are little people, and it's not like these were gigantic names. I mean, nobody's gonna see Lord of the Rings because it starred Elijah Wood. They're gonna see it because it's Lord of the Rings. This is still a very similar form of whitewashing. Heightwashing? Copyright. You probably don't think this is a big deal, but if we kept to this exact way of doing things, we wouldn't have the 31 flavors of kick-ass that is Peter Dinklage. This guy is so popular now that they're writing him in roles that weren't even meant for a little person. If you were to recast Peter Dinklage's role on Game of Thrones with, say, David Tennant on his knees, even though that's a brilliant actor, people would be offended to no end. We love Peter Dinklage, and the idea now of putting someone like David Tennant in there would be insulting and bad taste. Yet we just gave the Hobbit trilogy millions of dollars and complained about differences from the book, rather than the fact that we're spending God knows how much to have people walk on their knees and do optical illusions because we just didn't put a real little person in there. However, as much as those prejudices seem really worthy of anger, it's hard to tell where to draw the line. More transgender roles are opening up. Not all of them played by real transgenders, though many say they should be. Well, okay, I guess that seems legit, but there's also deaf roles out there. And shouldn't they be played by real deaf actors? Well, I guess that's a good point. Marlee Matlin won an Oscar and she's deaf. How about Jamie Foxx and Ray? In fact, most blind roles. Shouldn't they be played by real blind people? Yeah, how many blind actors are there? How about switching out Gary Sinise and Forrest Gump with a person who doesn't actually have legs? That seems like a very narrow field. Mr. Garrison on South Park is a gay man who had a sex change and turned lesbian. Shouldn't she be represented by an actor who is the exact same thing? On occasion, I think you just gotta act. Again, it's not always easy to figure out what's gonna be crossing an ethical line. There's no rule book for this kind of stuff, and the world is constantly changing. And it's not always easy to know what's acceptable or not acceptable, and by how many. A small minority, the mass majority, or does that even matter? The best way I can think to deal with it is treat it similar to when we cast adults as children. Would we prefer children? Yes, but we also understand child labor laws, the fact that they grow up and their voices change. So we're not as hard on people if an adult steps in to voice them. But really, we could be if we wanted to. There's lots of child actors out there looking for work, so is this like a prejudice against children? By now you're probably figuring out that whitewashing, heightwashing, gender washing, whatever your load of clothes is, it's all kind of selective. I love a lot of these performances and actors, even if they're not technically what the character's supposed to be. We love to point to our slippery slopes and say this will lead to everyone getting offended by anyone pretending to be something else, or the slippery slope that white people will be playing all roles until the end of our days. I don't think either will happen because that line we're apparently never supposed to cross has never fully been drawn. There's pros and cons. We can see past race and gender and open our minds to a good performance, but we can also feel really uncomfortable when someone can't see what they're doing can be really harmful. Maybe it all comes down to intent, but even that seems kind of blurred. The Wachowskis did a movie about reincarnation called Cloud Atlas, where every person plays every gender and ethnicity you can imagine. People are still on the fence about whether this is brilliant or amazingly uncomfortable. Or even coherent, but that's a different matter. It's made even more interesting, though, seeing how both directors have come out as transgender women. So, to their credit, if any famous directors know anything about living in another body, it's these two. But what if other transgender people or ethnicities are still offended by what they do? Is it suddenly nonsense? Have we just made these two the official voice on the subject? Again, there's no clear answer. With that said, it seems very unlikely that the makers of Ghost in the Shell or Doctor Strange were trying to push any pro-white agenda. People making these kind of movies hate bad press, and they don't want that kind of bad press attached. They probably just thought of all the other times people were okay with it, especially just in the last couple of years, and decided, they'll probably be okay with it this time too. That doesn't make the issue go away, but if you want people to be fair and open to what the problem is, you also have to be fair and open to what caused it. So, what exactly am I saying? We should be okay with roles played by white people even though they're not meant for white people? Hell no! This is America! A growing hodgepodge of variety and diversity, and we should explore it as much as we can. If you see a problem where those possibilities are being limited, bring them up. We deserve to see every opportunity that can be made available to us. I guess what I'm saying is, don't act like you've never been guilty of it, because we all have. We're trying to get better and we're trying to see things from a reasonable point of view. But nobody is perfect and nobody is going to accurately represent everybody's feelings on everything. We've all overlooked things for our benefit, whether it be in media or even in real life. We know we should do better and we're trying to do better, but we can't act like our acceptance of it in the past hasn't somehow played a part to all of this still happening. It's not likely either of these movies want bad press, so letting them know our concerns will certainly help change in the future. The sad fact is, relations with anybody different is always going to be a complicated issue, even if we don't want it to be. And, with so many in America celebrating the growth of limitation and disinterest in variety, it looks like it's going to stay complicated for a while. All we can do in media is make people aware of even more opportunities, without claiming that we're higher than them for noticing it. Because clearly, we don't notice everything. We do let things slide, and not always for the right reason. All we can do is try our best and encourage others to try their best. In a country that's still 63% white people, chances are there's still gonna be whitewashing in the near future. And bring up the mistakes that you see. But always remember, you probably made them at some point too. And if we want human beings to change, you have to acknowledge that you yourself are a human being. Well, that was uncomfortable. Boogers. Still got it. I'm a nostalgia guy, remember? So you don't have to. Coming next week, it's the film that brought 3D back to the cinemas, even if you didn't want it to be. It's Spy Kids 3D Game Over. But you can see it now under Vessel's ad-free early access. Just $3 a month to see tons of people's videos early, as well as a bunch of other extra features. Check it out and get the early scoop. Hey, this is Doug Walker doing the charity shout-out. You want to help out with a charity that Mara Wilson is a part of? Of course you do! This is Project You Are Okay. This is a non-profit organization whose mission is to create a catalog of accessible, funny, meaningful videos for teens struggling with mental health issues, done by adults who have been there before. In doing so, they provide practical assistance, but also, and perhaps more importantly, a sense of comfort, belonging, and hope. There's a ton of videos you can check out done by a variety of people. You can either donate to their cause, watch and get some helpful information for a possible problem you might have, or even make a video. Yeah, you can help by giving advice on something that was tough to go through but you survived and can help others to live with. Mara Wilson did one about OCD and depression, Will Wheaton did one about anxiety, the list goes on. It's a really cool creative idea with a bunch of various ways that you can contribute. Click on their site or their YouTube page to see how you can be helped or you can help out yourself. Show your support and share some wisdom.